So this session is a little different. Part of the Stanford Accelerator for Learning's mission is to work with partners. So we work with a lot of teachers and schools, as Victor mentioned. We work also with a lot of education technology companies. And so we invited today 3 of the leading AI edtech companies to speak about their collaboration with research. They all have a deep appreciation and deep engagement with research that they will touch on in a moment. Some are already partnering with Stanford. One is not, but soon will be. It's another interesting, I think, discussion that we need to bring to all of us around how do we think about this moment that Victor was noting for all of us on how do we collaborate? How do we collaborate with big tech developers? We have OpenAI, we have Google in the room, we have DeepMind in the room, as well as with all these entrepreneurial minds that are building some really great applications that will be used in classrooms. So with that, I would love for each one of you to introduce yourselves, speak about the great work that you are doing, and also speak specifically about your connections with research. Can I ask you to start?
Yep. Hi, everyone. My name is Rayanne Liu. I lead the AI and psychometrics teams at Amira Learning. My background is in academic research. I did my doctoral and postdoctoral work at Carnegie Mellon. I focused on learning and cognitive sciences in my doctoral work, and then worked on machine learning for educational application in my postdoc. Worked on student mastery models and a whole variety of other projects in the context of Learn Lab and the Simon Initiative, for those of you who might be familiar. I remember you, Candace. So at Amira, Amira is an AI-powered reading tutor. It listens to kids read stories and detects when and how kids are struggling to read, and strives to deliver the best and most effective sort of micro-intervention in those moments of struggle, or in moments when, you know, there's been a pattern of struggle, to best help kids learn to read better and more fluently. So just to give a sense of, and we also have an assessment and a dyslexia screening product as well. But just to give a sense of scale, we have about 500,000 users, distinct users, and we're in about 1,000 school districts. Most of them are in the United States, but we also have a growing presence in India, in Canada, Mexico, Central and South America as well. Our users are pretty active, and they're using Amira a lot. Just to give you a sense of that, just this school year alone, kids have read about 50 years worth of audio time with Amira. So we've come a long way since the days when, you know, it was a cold start problem with having data. With respect to research, you know, research and evidence and data, it's really, we're very serious about it. It's really, science is really the backbone of the company. We have, you know, examined the efficacy of our product, demonstrated efficacy across lots of studies, including RCTs. We have the highest ESSA evidence rating. And in addition to that, we've done a lot of collaboration with researchers, primarily so far with reading scientists and psychometricians, really leading experts in their fields. Much of the AI that we've developed so far has been in-house. We can talk a little bit more about why that is, but we're at a place where we're very excited to start to collaborate more broadly with AI research groups. So I'm very excited to be here. We've had a few discussions with some of the faculty here. We've talked to Emma Brunskill, we've talked to Noah Goodman, I talked to Bruce McCann this morning, so we're really excited to further those conversations and also explore other synergies that might exist.
Thank you. Jamie?
I'm Jamie Poskin. I'm the founder of TeachFX. I started my career as a classroom teacher, teaching math and English at a high school in Harlem. And TeachFX came out of, I was a student at the GSB here and at the Graduate School of Education. And it really came out of some research projects that I was doing. One was on why teachers leave the profession. I was also working with Rachel Lotan. And a big part of our mission at TeachFX is to really bring the research on teaching into practice. So what TeachFX is a way for teachers to record their class. We have an app on the phone or on your computer. And then we use voice AI to analyze call it the learning dynamics of that classroom, help provide feedback to the teacher. So we're looking at things like the kinds of questions you're asking as a teacher. When a student is producing reasoning language, like what are you doing as a teacher that's helping foster that? How are you helping foster a sense of belonging? What's your equity of voice look like? Are you using all sorts of high leverage teaching strategies like open-ended questioning or wait time? And then, giving that feedback to the teacher in this very, you can look at the report for 10 seconds, but that impacts your mindset and your strategy going in the next class, the next lesson. So we've really research has been a key part of what we've been doing since the beginning. I know a lot of you were here this morning when Dora was speaking. Dora, we met when you were a first-year PhD student, and we started talking about, we're really interested in some of the same stuff. I think we had some TeachFX interns label data at some point on questioning in the very early days, and that has really blossomed into more close collaboration, where we really see TeachFX as a way for researchers to conduct research, to use our tool to run an RCT, which we're starting to do now, as well as we're very interested in research projects that look at the efficacy of this new approach to changing teacher practice and student outcomes. And some of that has already happened, and we are forming, I would say, a research consortium to try to facilitate this across what we see as it's a new field in education, the idea of using automated teacher support to enhance equity in the classroom, and are trying to help bring together folks in academia who are interested in that, funders, and then we're an industry partner. We'd like to see other industry partners, honestly. Competitors, because we think there's so much promise in this field.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me again, Isabelle. Drew Magliozzi, CEO, co-founder of Mainstay. We are the only student engagement platform consistently proven to improve student enrollment, student persistence to a degree, and academic performance. We do this by engaging in a dynamic two-way conversation with students, typically over text message, by infusing conversational AI and mindset science to have a conversation that drives momentum and helps people overcome the barriers in the way of success. We've done research actually since the very beginning of the company. Our very first customer was Georgia State University. And in April of 2016, we helped them with their summer melt problem, which is a challenge where students say they're going to enroll, but ultimately don't follow through with it. And this is more for schools like Georgia State than Stanford, obviously. And it's life getting in the way. It's the bureaucracy. It's the unfamiliarity. And we designed a conversation that helped them make it all the way through to the threshold of college. And we moved the needle in that RCT about 4% on new students enrolling in a sort of 50-50 treatment control group, which is about 320 people who enrolled who wouldn't have otherwise, and millions of dollars for the university that really needed it. But they also said at that moment, while we were getting patted on the back, hey, can you help people not only cross the threshold, but get to the finish line? Really, that's the ultimate goal. And that, it turns out, is a much harder problem, but we went to the drawing board with them and rolled up our sleeves, understood the 22 key barriers and behaviors in that journey, and again, moved the needle about 3 percentage points on year-to-year persistence at the school, which is equivalent at Georgia State to about 1,200 students who otherwise would have dropped out, stopped out, or transferred out. And again, more than $10 million for the university saved that year. So we believe that we want to close equity gaps, help students succeed, and do so in the context of the business of higher education. We also work in academic success. In the last year, we reached about right around 6 million people nationally across about 230 partners in the US. And some of the wonderful researchers we worked with are at Brown University, the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. We're actually kicking off our very first qualitative research study. We know that it works, but we want to get deeper into understanding why it works. So we'll be working with Mitchell Stevens here at Stanford, who's an incredible qualitative researcher. And I'm excited to talk in all the other innovations we've got planned for generative AI as well. So thanks for having me. I'm excited for the conversation.
And Joe, can you say a few more words on two things? One is the RCT that you did last year.
Oh,
the phenomenal results.
The academic success?
Yeah, the academic success. And two, can you speak also about the work with Carol Dweck and David Yeager?
Okay. So the RCT we did last year was actually perhaps the most impactful one we've ever achieved. It was in the context of a large lecture course at Georgia State as well, which happened to be taught online due to COVID. And we ran a 50-50 RCT. And this course has high DFW rates, meaning a lot of students get a D and F or withdraw. And if you have that situation your freshman or sophomore year in this course, it really limits your likelihood of graduating. Not just from an academic perspective, but in a state like Georgia, grades are actually money for students. If you drop below a 3.3 GPA, you will lose your Georgia Hope Scholarship. And if you lose Hope, but literally and figuratively, your likelihood of graduating is quite a bit lower. So we deployed our product in this course, again, 50-50 treatment and control. And it sent, weekly reminders, offered quizzes over text message. We infused some mindset-oriented content with a postdoc from Dave Yeager's lab at UT Austin. And ultimately moved the needle. It was pretty profound. On average, about 7 points out of 100 on students' final grades. And for first-gen students, the delta was even bigger. It was 11 points on a scale of 100. So about a full letter grade better for the treatment group. And then the things we're working on right now, maybe this is on the generative AI side. And yes, Carol is being very helpful. As is Dave Yeager and a number of other folks at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, particularly, helping us train generative AI not on factual teaching and learning, but the mindset-oriented encouragement that people need. It turns out that when we engage in these conversations, oftentimes students say things to us like, I'm not sure I'm good enough. And they're talking to a chatbot, of course, which they say is they're more willing to be vulnerable because they don't feel judged by it. And they say, I'm not sure of college material, or I might drop out, or I don't think I can follow through with this. And during those moments of doubt, we always escalate it to a person and have a human being respond. But it turns out that typically when people respond, we all make the same mistake. We do the cheerleader when in fact what a student needs most is a coach. So rather than saying, no, you can do it, it's how can you reframe the situation, ask a question, and put that individual in the position of autonomy for themselves to see their struggle as a good thing and an opportunity to learn and grow. And we've trained a generative AI model based on OpenAI's GPT-3 with the help of some amazing researchers to actually mimic the best sorts of academic coaching language, and not to do it on behalf, not to disintermediate the educator, but rather to showcase these messages to the educators so that they can modify them, personalize them, and send them. So it has the effect of not just getting better coaching to students, but also being a learning moment for the educator who's getting served these prompts to be a little bit better, as you know.
And we're doing a similar project with Dave Yeager and Carol Dweck, looking at teachers in the classroom using this language. And, phase one is like, I think, Dora, was it you that mentioned earlier about how there's not a lot of examples of this even in data sets. So we have a pretty big data set of teachers in the classroom. So we're starting there as a way to sort of build the training set for that model. But the future phases would be to develop an insight for teachers so that they could automatically see when their students and when they are using growth mindset language as a way to promote more of it in the classroom. So yeah, very.
So a lot of your three organizations are very rare. It's like seems so obvious that research and education technology companies should partner all the time, and they do not. So you're part of this very rare group that is taking research very seriously and from the start. So curious about why you did it this way and what has worked well and maybe also what has not worked as well. And Rana, maybe I will start with you.
Sure, yeah. I think I mentioned already that really research and science and data are the foundation of our company. And we really believe that, bringing the great, many decades of research, not just in cognitive and reading sciences, but also in AI to impact actual kids positively at scale is one of the, the best applications you can expect to come out of research, right? So we believe really firmly in that. We also believe in science and evidence as being the way to decide if something's going to be effective for kids. And so I think it's a philosophical foundation for us. I think that for a while, at least in the K-12 ed tech space, unfortunately, evidence and research wasn't the main driver of sales and interest. But the tides are starting to change, I think, on that front, and I think that's really a long time coming. So, more recently, we have seen interest from not just school districts, but also, entire like state education departments, because they know that what we've been doing hasn't been working, and that some of our NAEP scores are at all-time lows. And so I think there's a lot of appetite for evidence-based products and evidence-based learning.
Yes, certainly in reading. And right now, Amira is only reading, yeah?
Yeah, I think for us, there's three big reasons. One is the whole impetus to start TeachFX came from research, right? So I'm trying to bring these sort of practices that we know what good math discourse looks like, but it's not happening in very many classrooms. Like I think John Hattie showed that teachers talk 70 to 80% of the time. I think that's gone up. We've looked at our data during the pandemic. It was really sad. The average student only spoke for 7 seconds per hour of instruction during virtual learning. So we know that there's these sort of research ideas that informed the whole impetus for the company. And then, of course, we want to use research to validate that this is having a real impact. I think for us, there's also a third big reason, which is because using voice AI to surface automated supports for teachers is not it's not an industry in K-12. It's not like a thing. There's a lot of underlying technology and just advances in general that we as a small startup can only chip away at. But if we can leverage a partnership to build a better diarization algorithm that can tell the difference between voices in a really chaotic audio environment like a classroom, or at least it should be chaotic, that could be really powerful for the field, for research, for industry. And so that's the kind of thing that, we've been working on that problem ourselves for 5 years now, 6 years. But if we can bring great minds together to solve these sort of underlying challenges, that could go a really long way.
Yeah. The same question for you, but research is expensive. You need staff. And then schools do not really care. So why do it? Why did you do it? And what was it helpful?
So 2 answers. One, the first answer is a lot like yours, Jamie, which is we're here to talk about AI, but actually I think there's almost as exciting of developments happening in cognitive science, mindset science, and human behavior change and understanding how to talk to people to motivate them to take action. And I think the impetus, most entrepreneurs probably have this sense of I want to apply the things that are going to move the needle and do so in really scalable ways. So I love reading research. The why did we do research was sort of a mundane thing. I wanted to know if it worked. One, because I didn't want to be wasting my time on something that wasn't working. And two, I was probably a mediocre salesman. The industry is really used to buying things on faith. And I'd be talking to a VP of enrollment and they'd say, does it work? And I'd say, I have no idea. Let's find out. And that is a really bad sales pitch. But luckily, the folks at Georgia State were just as curious as me. And sure enough, it did work. It is expensive. And like, look, we fell into the best possible scenario, which is we've been the beneficiaries mostly indirectly of grant funding, which comes through our partners to do research. And you have to find the right fertile partners who actually have their act together with data in order to truly track outcomes at the granular level. It's incredibly difficult. It's probably more due to luck that we've had these things than skill. But it has been incredibly galvanizing for us as a company to hone in on what works and get increasingly better at it. I don't think we could have done so otherwise. But it is not always an accelerant for sales. I shall warn, it is not the silver bullet. There's no silver bullet for that.
What is your best guess of if you had to give a percentage of schools that ask you for research validation?
That ask us?
Yeah.
0. And the question is maybe which ones believe it when we say them is probably more like 30%. I would say. I think there's a real dearth of understanding of even what an RCT is, unfortunately, outside of IR departments and things. Yeah, you're nodding.
Yeah, similar for us. I think it's not 0. We do have some, but it's rare. It's rare that anyone would even ask.
Yeah, I don't think. What about you, Rand? I'm curious in the K-12 space.
Yeah, in our experience, it's much less frequent that it's the schools themselves. It's more that there are certain, leading districts that are, for lack of a better term, influencers in the area,
exactly,
or states actually. State education departments are increasingly asking for this kind of evidence, and they're pushing they're helping to push the products that are really evidence-based.
Switching gears a little bit, thinking about this moment that we are in with generative AI, where would you like to see research go? Where would research be helpful to certainly your organizations, but also maybe more broadly the field at large?
Yeah, so I'm happy to start. We have lots of interesting ideas for where to go. We've sort of mostly solved the reading error detection and classification problem. I'm not going to say we've perfectly solved it, but we have our path, and we've done that mostly in-house. The main reason for that is just pragmatic. We had to move really, really fast in the first couple of years as a startup. But now we have this opportunity, I think. One of the things I would love to do is be able to generate stories that not only are engaging for the kids who are reading those stories, but also can target the specific kinds of underlying reading skills that we know from our student mastery models those kids are struggling on, right? Imagine if they could read a story that's really fun for them, but forces them to work on those skills and get better faster. I think that would be really exciting. One aspect of our product that I haven't mentioned yet is that we also have a parent-facing, home-facing app that's augmented reality based. So that is an environment in which there's a lot more opportunity for conversational dialogue as kids learn to read within an actual world in the app. So there's a lot of exciting possibilities there.
I think the next,
yeah, go for it.
I actually think the dominant dialogue around ChatGPT and generative AI is misguided. Typically what people are doing, and if you read the press and are following on Twitter, they're looking at this technology as an AI Aristotle. Can it be the all-knowing teacher that I can ask it anything about the world's knowledge and it will give me the right answer? And we celebrate it when it gets it right, and we pillory the thing when it gets it wrong and say it is very binary. But actually, I think there's, particularly in education, a different angle to look at it, which is not as the originator and ability to a teacher, sort of that all-knowing tutor, but rather than Aristotle, how can we better understand the capacity of these language models to, instead of answer our questions, ask the questions that are going to unlock knowledge for individuals, get the inquiry, and get people to solve problems for themselves, and because that is the locus of learning. If you've ever met a master teacher, and there's some extraordinary ones, Dave Yeager has one in his life called Sergio, who he talks about a lot. Sergio is this breakthrough physics teacher in the state of Texas, has performance of his students in AP physics is like 2 standard deviations better than the mean in a school where only about 10% of the students go to college. And Sergio's technique is when students ask him a question, he literally never, ever tells them the answer. He only asks them questions. He asks them to understand and unpack the problem. He asks what they've tried before. He asks how they're going to tackle the problem next. Because the best teachers, while they have the knowledge, know that it is not the deployment and the giving of the answers that is the best instruction. So I think rather than asking and looking at these generative models as like, can they be the AI Aristotle? We can reorient ourselves to like, can they be the AI Socrates? Like the famous teacher who claimed to know absolutely nothing, but asked amazing questions and got the best out of his pupils. And I think there is a real fertile ground in that area that not many people are looking at. And hopefully there's some awesome people in this room who can respond to that call for proposals and do that, because I think it is the area that has the most untapped potential for the technology as it exists today, and probably for the long term.
I'm so with you on that. Socrates. This is the teacher in me, but I think that the teacher is the main leverage point for change we have, not just in education, but in society. And so researching how to make teachers more effective, more supported, that is obviously where we're interested in at TeachFX, but I think that's where I'd like to see more energy go. And I think the other side of that, or related, is implementation.
Yeah, and Jimmy, can I push you a little bit on your answer? How do we do it? What would you like to see happen? Is it collaborative on something, on a topic like this? Like can you maybe expand a little bit on your thinking? Sharing data. What would it take?
Yeah, well, there's in terms of like what we do, there's so many things, right? It's which insights are actually driving more change for the teacher, which insights make their students feel a deeper sense of belonging. How do we, in a light touch way, improve that teacher's feelings of self-efficacy? So there's a million interesting questions on how you can make a teacher more effective. I think but to even zoom out one layer, it's like, can more research focus on that part of the system? I think would be powerful, as opposed to, there's lots of other important parts of the system, curriculum. The other part of it, I think that I feel like is often missing is it comes back to the quote from earlier today that Larry Cuban about the chalkboard and the chalk, like figuring out how to make something actually work in the real messy world of K-12 schools is, I think, often understudied. And we have great models for what pedagogy should look like. And I've spent a lot of time like listening back to classrooms and like just seeing this enormous gap between like what we say teaching should look like and what pedagogy should look like. And then like the reality on the ground. I think that we would just, as a society, benefit a lot by saying, hey, look, yes, we know we want it to be like this. It's not that right. What are the sort of low-hanging fruit that will get us going in that direction rather than it being like a binary thing? And that's where like the messiness of an implementation study is going to start to see like, well, where are you moving the needle in sort of maybe modest ways, but at a real scale.
I think there's huge potential also outside the classroom and what we consider the traditional learner, the non-traditional learner in higher ed in particular, is now more than half of the students in America, and probably shouldn't be called non-traditional anymore. Mitchell Stevens calls them the working learner. And I think that is an area where yes, it's about the teaching and learning and how do you get someone who's got a million other things in their life going on to learn something, but also how do you help somebody who's maybe turned their back on higher education and walked out the door, find a way in that allows them, Sarah, I'm looking at you, face their trauma that they experienced when they left, return with dignity and grace and resilience for the shame they might be experiencing. I think there's a whole host of the sort of non-cognitive but emotional aspects of teaching and learning that are also really low-hanging fruit for this technology and for research and applied technology in general. There's a lot more going on that gets a mind ready to receive learning. Because the learning doesn't happen in the textbook and it doesn't happen in the LMS or even in the classroom. It happens between our ears. And only if someone is willing to learn can you actually teach them something, and how do you get them to the place of willingness as consistently as possible. I think there are a handful of like archetypes. Like we talked about the Plato or the Socrates and Aristotle, but I also think there's this, this idea of like, what is the coach or mindset oriented persona that gets someone that almost everyone in this room probably has experienced that teacher who changed your life or who changed your approach to a particular subject. And it wasn't the knowledge or the questions, but really how they showed up and how they demanded you show up. And I think there's a lot there too, not only with what we do, but also with what you do in the classroom, and probably even with parents, I imagine, who play a much larger role in the education of students than we often acknowledge. But we usually treat them as outside the system, when in fact we should be finding ways to welcome them in more and involved in the process.
So I have a lot more questions. I will ask one final one, but then I would love for the audience to be ready with more. We have Slido with a QR code here if you want to use that, but we'll also have a mic if you want to ask live questions. So the last question is really the big one, and it's one that I've been actually Dan Schwartz asked it for me several months ago, and I've been thinking about it since then. So we have those big language models, these big foundation models. They were not built for education purposes. So right now, in many ways, it feels like we are playing catch up. It's being used in education broadly, but it's not built for education. And we are hearing from the three of you, and you're sitting on millions of data on reading, on college success, on teacher feedback. Is there an opportunity to leverage some of those data for a foundation models for education specifically?
The idea of a foundation model for education is incredibly encouraging, but I don't think it's going to come from us. To build ChatGPT took $100 million of just GPU time on Microsoft Azure. That is not a game for startups. It's not even a game for universities. I actually think the foundational data that I would love to see would be a consortium of schools with one of these technology titans that is going to take time series student achievement data and create a foundational model about the trajectory of a human being through an education experience. I think that could be incredibly powerful and could be both an anonymized data set that could be useful for synthetic data generation. That could be a real interesting thing, but I don't know if there is an economic incentive to do it, much like there was to build ChatGPT. But I do think it is incredibly costly, not just from server time, but also from the talent perspective. There's not a tremendous amount of talent also. We're lucky to have amazing people. Our CTO, Toby, is here. We've got a great team, but we're small and scrappy. We don't have the resources that a FANG company will have. And so I don't know if we have the capacity to do it, but I would say it would elevate the field tremendously if the powers that be organize themselves to make something like that. And I would most assuredly use it or help to build it, but I don't think we could do it ourselves. I don't know, do you guys agree?
I don't know about foundation models, but we certainly are sitting on a trove of data that is longitudinal, increasingly so, extremely fine-grained. I think there's a lot that can be done with that. And in addition, for applications like reinforcement learning, I think we can quickly deploy new models and algorithms in to start working live, and we get immediately tons of usage on it. And kind of do like AZ testing, and so yeah, there's a lot of, I think, rich opportunity with the data that we have. I don't know about large language models, though. I mean, I think it would be cool to give it lots and lots of children's stories and have a model be great at children's story writing. But short of that, yeah, I don't know if our data is particularly useful for that.
So I think we'll have some mics floating here, or if a lot of you have great voices. I see one hand already here on the front. Bruce?
So I would love to hear the three of you collaborate on the following challenge of the moment. So imagine that we have 50 million test scores as kids go from 3rd grade through 8th grade. And as we look across the nation, some of these school environments, 3rd through 8th grade, are actually accelerating faster than the national average. And some are progressing dismally below the national average in terms of grade by grade progress. And the challenge for social science has been, how do we characterize the difference between these schools? You can send people out to a couple of the schools and try to sample and try to get an impression, but if the three of you were to collaborate on this question, were to give an answer, and you had 12 months, how would you approach that problem?
It's fun. I heard Raj Chetty speak yesterday, and the similar question occurred to me. Is because he talks a lot about the geography of social mobility, and really, at certain places, it's performing great, in other places, it's not, and sometimes even antithetical to where you might think and whom you might think it is performing well for. I think the only answer is to go to those places and see for yourself and talk to the folks who are involved. Because I don't think we are capturing the necessary data in the systems of record that would adequately shed a light on it. I think you have to, and I don't think it's individuals necessarily. It's not to say that there's one individual in this community who's moving the needle for everybody, but there has to be some diagnosis of what's going on. And I don't think you can know unless you're in the wild with the people.
I would have a strong hypothesis that the classroom environment is a major factor there, a causal factor there. And we have seen with our partners that there is at least strong correlations between, greater student discourse and more learning. That's been well established in the research. So I'm not a researcher, but I would want to think about a study that, like, well, what can we learn about what's happening in classrooms that might explain this? I think one of the cool things about what we're doing at TeachFX is that when teachers do look at this data, they change how they teach. So that, from a research standpoint, can be a little tricky. But I do think that is kind of the exact question that we're interested in, and not just answering the question, because I do think there are some answers. Like, we do know that certain types of classrooms are better at fostering learning. So not just understanding that in a deeper way, which is important, but also understanding how to change those classrooms so that more classrooms can be like the ones that are working.
I think if you operate under the assumption that all of our products were active in all of these classrooms,
that's
right, which is a major assumption. But
yes.
Under that, I mean, we can track growth, both kind of at the summative assessment level, but also formative assessments and formative data points along the way. Let's assume we're like talking about reading. And we have a lot of data, within their usage of our product, but then you would have a lot of data on what exactly is happening in the classroom around that. How are the teachers also then using the data that they're getting back about, what skills overall are the kids struggling on? How are they adapting their instruction? Are they adapting their instruction? Are they, you know, how, yeah.
I have to riff on this because I think so much of the data that teachers are given now is like how each individual kid is doing on certain skills. And there's this underlying assumption that like, I as a teacher, am now going to use that data to like personalize instruction for these 35 kids. And I'm going to do that in an effective way. And so a lot of effort goes into collecting that data. And if you look at Heather Hill's research, it's not making an impact on how teachers teach. So we're, in my view, like really over-indexed on a type of data that's not changing behavior. And so we need to complement that kind of data with something that it's about what I'm doing as a teacher, because that's the kind of data that you can actually, move the needle on.
And is it aligned kind of with students' struggles across your classroom and their needs, and the interplay between those things. And so if you had all that data, I think we could answer a lot of interesting. And then if we had engagement data, right? How do the kids feel about their learning experience? How motivated are they? How engaged or disengaged are they? And I think we could answer a lot of questions about how to foster an ideal learning environment, but also one that's realistic to implement in classrooms, which is a point I want to double click on, because I think that's one of the biggest challenges of research and practice partnerships, which is that research can sometimes be sheltered from the realities of implementation, and that's why these partnerships are so important.
Time for one more question.
Make it a good one.
Can you identify what differentiates students or teachers for whom your interventions are not effective? Does this reflect existing disparities in education? What can you imagine doing about this?
I can start. Yeah, I mean, so there's research that shows that the students that benefit the most from opportunities to engage dialogically in the classroom are our most vulnerable kids, students experiencing poverty, English learners, students with disabilities. So our whole idea is, how can we design an intervention that not only has equity in mind from like, it needs to be fair and not do the wrong thing, but like we're actually trying to reverse a cycle. So I think that for us is like core to like why we started the company and what we're trying to do is like there are certain types of and we hear this all the time from our teachers. They say, well, I realized after using this tool, like in my honors class, which you can sort of interpret what that might mean in terms of what the students look like. I was letting them own the classroom way more and letting them have more dialogue. But in my regular class, my remedial class, I came in with this assumption that I had to like spoon feed them material, which now that I'm reflecting on it, like I know that's not effective, but that was my mindset. And so that is like core to what I think we're trying to change. So thank you for the question.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No, you go.
I think for us, the kids that our product doesn't reach and fails to be able to have that impact on are the kids who are not ready to engage with it or can't engage with it. I think there's a whole spectrum of reasons for that. Some of it's like they're not like eating or resting, like really basic needs are not being met, right? And that's a little bit out of sort of our control. There's another sort of spectrum of kids where they come in. It used to be that our product was really more focused on fluency, and kids were coming in and they couldn't read like an isolated word at all, like a CVC word at all. So we have actually actively expanded to work really hard to address the needs of those kids and expand it out so that they can learn like the fundamental skills within our product. But then there's also this other set of kids where the major problem is just engagement, right? It's that like they could be ready to learn, but for one reason or another, they're not engaged enough with doing within our product. I will say that many kids actually find it more accessible to work with Amira because they don't feel like, if a kid knows that they're really behind in reading, they'll often be very ashamed to work with a human tutor because they know that they're kind of judging them, or they know that it means that the people know that they're behind, and they just find this like avatar and this AI to be a little bit more friendly. So that's good. I feel like we're really accessing that population. But yeah, some kids just still have an engagement issue, and we're actively studying that and trying to address that and seeing if we can reach more of those kids.
And for us, typically the learners we help most are from first generation, low income, historically resilient backgrounds. But that's the demographics. The place that we focus most is on like the meat of the bell curve. And we typically move the needle for the people who, are on the edge, are on the cusp. The ones who are the highest achievers don't need our help. And if you're a hell no, I refuse to engage or to enroll, there's not much we can do. But we're at the people who set an intention, they really do truly want to follow through, and just life or circumstances get in the way. That's the type of population that we typically help best. And it's a few percentage points here and there makes a big difference for a lot of those folks. That's for sure. Yeah, thanks for the question.
Well, join me to thank our three panelists and for everything that you do. Really, really thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.